called Troy that night and reluctantly broke up with him over the phone. I couldn't bring myself to see him again. It would be too painful. I spent years building my business. I wasn't about to let that go. Even though I loved Troy, I knew that I had to let him go. I did not want to get sued or worse, end up in jail. But as I think about it now, jail would have been much better than the events that followed. 6 months into dating Jerome, we got married. Jerome was mean and selfish, the complete opposite of Troy's caring and thoughtful personality. I wasn't allowed to order my own food at restaurants or even pick out my own clothes when we went out together. He said he had a reputation to maintain and he needed his wife to remember that. After much debating, I was allowed to keep my cake business, for which I was grateful since it kept my mind off the horrible life I was now assigned to. One afternoon, after dropping off a cake for a client at her office, I saw Troy in the lobby. I pretended that I didn't see him, but he called my name, and I had no choice but to acknowledge him. "Hi, Troy. How have you been?" I asked. "As good as I can be," he smiled. "Would you like to grab a cup of coffee with me?" I didn't expect Troy to want to see me after our breakup, far less want to grab a cup of coffee with me. After being with Jerome for 5 years, he managed to alienate me from my friends. Talking to someone other than my mother and Jerome was worth the risk. "Okay, sure," I said. Troy and I walked to the coffee shop across the road. We ordered and sat with our coffees. Even after 5 years, he was able to make me laugh. It felt as though nothing changed between us. It felt nice. During our coffee meeting, I got a call. I looked down at my phone and my stomach turned as I realized it was Jerome. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me as I answered. "Hello?" I said as I looked at Troy apologetically. "Why is my wife sitting in a coffee shop with another man?" Jerome asked angrily. "How do you know where I am? What are you talking about?" "I'm chatting with an old friend," I tried to explain. Before I could finish, Jerome said, "You need to leave now. We will talk about this when you get home." Jerome hung up. I apologized to Troy and I got up and left. As I was getting into my car, I noticed a guy in a brown trench coat and hat looking at me. He tipped his hat, smiled, and jumped into his car. When I got home, Jerome and I got into a huge fight. I also told him that I thought a guy was following me, to which he responded he had someone follow me every time I left the house. I wasn't allowed to leave my house for a month because Jerome said that I could not be trusted. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I had no choice but to hire a delivery person to drop off my cakes for me. One night, I called my mother on the phone. "Mom, enough is enough. I can't do this anymore," I cried. "What are you talking about?" my mother asked. "You can't live and left the house. I wasn't allowed to leave my house for a month because Jerome said that I could not be trusted. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I had no choice but to hire a delivery person to drop off my cakes for me." One night, I called my mother on the phone. "Mom, enough is enough. I can't do this anymore," I cried. "What are you talking about?" my mother asked. "You can't live in a nice house? You can't stand having all of your bills paid and getting everything you want? Tell me, what are you really talking about? I'm tired of being a prisoner. This is not what I signed up for." "I found the slips, Mom. I know that Jerome has been sending you money every month. Is this why you wanted me to be with Jerome? So that your bank account could be replenished?" my mother responded. "I worked 3 jobs trying to take care of you when your father walked out on us. So it's about time I got something out of it. You don't think I am tired? You don't think I want nice things after working all those years to raise you? And I got nothing out of it." My eyes widened. Did my mother just say that to me? After arguing with my mother on the phone for about 10 minutes, I told her that I was leaving Jerome, and there was nothing she or Jerome could do about it. I hung up on my mother and packed some things quickly. If my mother wanted to expose my secret about the cake mix, so be it. I lost 5 years of my life, and I wasn't about to lose any more. The last thing I grabbed before leaving the house was some money that Jerome kept in the safe. I got into my car and went to the closest ATM. I emptied whatever I had in my accounts before Jerome caught on and closed them off. I wanted to call Troy and tell him that I was leaving the country, but I didn't want to involve him. I got to the airport and waited nervously. praying that the flight I booked on the way didn't get canceled. I heard my flight number call, and they said it had been delayed because of bad weather. My heart dropped, knowing that the longer I stayed at the airport, there was a greater chance of Jerome finding me and making me go back. "Good night, ma'am. Can you follow me, please?" An officer with a monotone voice jolted me back to reality. "What is this about?" I asked. "Ma'am, I am asking nicely that you come with me," the officer said. I knew that putting up a struggle would be useless since it was 4-1, so I followed them with my luggage. I was placed in a room, and I looked on in horror as everything from my luggage was thrown onto the floor as they searched through my luggage. "What are you looking for?" I yelled as I attempted to pick up everything from the floor. Then I looked on as one of the officers took a knife and cut the inner lining of my suitcase. He held up a small package, and when he opened it, jewels fell out. I watched as one of the officers got on the phone. "Hello? Yes, sir. Found the jewels and the perpetrator," the officer said. After a few seconds on the phone, he hung up and looked at me. I don't know how that got in there. I didn't put that there." I screamed as the officers dragged me to the detainment center where I spent the night. The next day, I was taken to a small office. Troy and I left my mother's house and went to his place. We discussed our next move, and he suggested that the best thing I could do was to come clean with my clients about what I had been doing. That way, my mother would no longer have a hold over me. I knew that what Troy was saying made sense, but I was so scared about the outcome. Eventually, I agreed, and then took to my social media page to confess what I had been doing all these years. Troy stayed by my side until I finished. The next day, clients and viewers of my page had different views. Some of them called for my head, while others appreciated the experience and skill it took to decorate my cakes. Needless to say, I lost some of my clients, but some of them didn't care if I used box cake mix or not. Jerome and I got divorced. It was a grueling 6 months of courts and lawyers. I didn't ask for anything, except that he paid my lawyer fees, which the judge granted. About a year after our divorce, my mother and Jerome got married, and I never spoke to my mother again. Once the divorce was final, Troy and I had a wedding to plan. That day was a magical one, and the cake that I made was the talk of the wedding. After the wedding, I kissed Troy and his new bride, Jenny, and wished them all the best. I hopped on a plane and started a new life in another country, and I haven't looked back since. Hi, my name is Brooklyn. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can hear more amazing stories. If you do, within the next 7 days, something wonderful is going to happen to you.
I really wish I had never discovered my father's double life. Now I don't know how to fix the mess I begun. Let me tell you a bit about my family. You can't quite understand what happened without knowing more about them. I am the youngest of 3 daughters. Cindy and Rose are 2 and 4 years older than me, and we've always been really close. My childhood was a happy one, playing around the backyard with my siblings. Mom was always around, taking care of us and taking care of the house. She was a stay-at-home mother, and not a lazy one. She cooked, cleaned, and always had time to play with us and help us with our homework. Dad was a great provider. He had a good salary and made sure we wanted for nothing. The truth of the matter was, we were happy, or so it seemed. My dad was incredibly loving, but always seemed so busy. We understood he worked long hours and had to take regular business trips outside the city. It was normal to us, and we never questioned it. At least not until he began acting sloppy. You see, after so many years of sneaking around, my dad grew lazy, believing we'd never catch up to his weird activities. He was wrong, and this mistake ended up messing everything up. Everyone in the house began noticing some odd behavior from him. He'd arrive later than usual, keep his phone away from the entire family, and check his messages in a rush. He even stepped outside to make phone calls, which seemed normal at first, but paired up with the rest of his strange attitudes, it made me feel even more suspicious. My mother was completely oblivious to his attitude, but I think she was trying to turn a blind eye to the whole situation. Now I think that maybe I should have done the same thing. If it was work, would he be so antsy when he read his emails? I thought that didn't make any sense, so I decided I needed to investigate what was going on. I've always been incredibly curious, ever since I was a little girl. If I sensed a mystery going on around me, I immediately needed to find the answer to it. I decided to do some research. One day when my dad was out shopping, I sat down at his laptop and tried to unlock it. Much to my surprise, his password was incredibly easy to guess. It was his birthday. I rolled my eyes at how silly he was, but my amusement didn't last long. He had several tabs open, and one of them was his email. I browsed through it, and the more I read, the worse it got. I was completely shocked by what I saw. Dad was messaging another woman. She called him by another name, a fake name, and apparently had a child with him. There were pictures of my dad with this other woman and my half-brother, who was at least 10 years younger than me. I felt sick. How could my dad do something so horrible to us? Betray my mom and lie to his family? I took screenshots of the whole thing and